guys, so welcome back. So we're continuing with this example. We finished the metal tubing and the foam. Now we're on the direct labor. And again, we start with the last column. The last column would be actual rate times actual quantity. Dealing with labor, our rate would be what we pay per hour, and our quantity would be labor hours. So if we go to the question, under the actual information, they say, well, workers actually work 1,200 hours at a rate of 44, and that's so we just simply say 1,200 times 44, actual hours times actual rate, and that gives us the 52,800. Okay, and then the middle column is again actual hours, but this time multiplied by the standard rate, because the only difference between these two columns should be that for the rate essentially, and the standard rate is 40 Rand an hour. So we say 1,200 times 40, and that gives you the 48,000. And now the difference between these two columns, between 48,000 and 52,800, is 4,800. Now, is it favorable or unfavorable? Well, we actually paid more per hour than we expected. 44 is more than 40, so that will be an adverse or unfavorable variance. Okay, then with regards to labor, we want to now look at the quantity variance, and I just want to see, you'll see under metal tubing there was two calculations. Under foam there was one calculation, because what was actual purchases equaled what was used. Now for labor, you can't keep leftover hours, so in other words, effectively what the workers actually end up working is what was actually spent on production. There may be differences, things like sometimes people work for 8 hours but they're only productive 7 hours, and that difference is known as idle time, and you get idle time variances, but those variances are beyond the scope of this course. So with this course, when it comes to labor, we assume that the hours that was paid for equals the hours that was actually productive. Okay, so therefore you just can assume that the 1,200 hours was actually used or actually productive. So there's not a separate calculation for labor hours used. So now the only last thing to calculate is the flex budget, and again I want to remind you of this principle. It's a standard cost per 1 unit times actual units produced, which for this example, all the actual seats is 500, so everything gets multiplied by 500. However, the labor standard cost per unit is 80 Rand, so it's 80 Rand per unit times actual units produced of 500 seats, which gives you the 40,000, and then it's the 40,000 versus the 48, and that difference is 8,000. So this represents how much we expected to actually spend on labor based on the actual production. This is how much we actually spent, so we spent too much, so therefore that is an adverse variance. Okay, last two variances. Next one is variable overhead variances. So we start with the last column. So that is the actual times the actual. So in this scenario, they actually told us that the variable overheads amounted to 70,000, so they gave us the actual. So the 70,000 is given to you. Then this middle column is the actual hours times the standard rate. So they don't give us the actual hours, but we can work out the actual hours, because remember this 70,000 is effectively equal to the actual rate times the actual, in this case machine hours, because variable overheads and fixed overheads allocated based on machine hours. So the 70,000 is equal to, as I said, actual rate times actual machine hours. If the actual rate is 56 Rand, I can simply say 70 divided by 56 to give me the actual machine hours, and if you do that, it comes to 1,250 hours. Okay, and the standard rate per hour from this table for variable overheads is 62 Rand, so the 1,250 times 62 is 77,500, and then I compare the 77,500 to the 70,000, and the difference.
Here's what I found on the web for hair 77,000.
Then the difference between the 77,500 and the 70,000 is 7,500, and as you can see, the 70,000 is less than what we expected, so that's a favorable variance. Alright, and then lastly, the flex budget. Again, flex budget is just actual units produced, but now you know we've actually produced 500 seats and we multiply by the standard rate per unit, and the standard rate per unit for variable overhead is 124, so it's 124 times 500, and we get to 62,000, and the 62,000 is what I expected. I actually spent 77,500, so that difference of 15,500 is adverse. I spent more than what I expected. And then last but not least, the fixed overhead variances, and the only difference when it comes to fixed overhead, this middle column heading gets changed to the static budget, and the reason for that is we don't fixed overhead is fixed, so it's not influenced by what actually happens. So that in other words, you can't change the budget to what actually happens. So this column becomes a static budget. Okay, so again, go to the last column. It's actual times actual. Remember, fixed overhead is allocated based on machine hours. The actual machine hours is 1250. We calculated that before under variable overheads, and the actual rate is given to us in the scenario of 84 Rand per machine hour. So that is the 105. The static budget is, well, we budgeted to produce 600 units. Where does that come from? There we go. Budgeted to produce 600 units and at a rate of budget rate of 160. So 600 times 160 gives us the 96,000. So we actually budgeted 96,000. We budgeted 96,000. We actually spent 105, and so this 9,000 is an adverse variance. We spent more than we budgeted. And then lastly, the flex budget. Again, flex budget is always actual units produced, which in this question it's 500 throughout, times standard rate for 1 unit, and the fixed overhead standard rate is 160. So 160 times 500 is 80,000. Okay, and then the difference between these two is 16,000, and it would be adverse because the static budget is more than the flex budget, so therefore we have a adverse variance. Alright, so that ends the variances of this question. When we come back, we will just finish off with the actual profit, budgeted profit, as well as the reconciliation. Thanks guys, cheers.